Hey everyone, welcome to Paranormal M channel. Did you miss me? I'm back at the mic and ready to hit you with some more paranormal stories. Before we get started, make sure you smash that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss any of the latest videos. And drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. It's always so cool seeing you guys from all over. I really love this part every time. Thanks for always listening. And don't be afraid to share your own paranormal experiences with me too. So, this happened to me a few months ago. And honestly, I still get chills just thinking about it. I haven't really told many people, because it feels like the kind of thing you jinx by saying out loud, you know? But I'm going to tell you, just as it happened to me. It all started on the Thursday night. I was in my room, half lying on my bed, watching this podcast I love, Midnight Echoes, with that girl Lena who always talks about creepy stories and urban legends. I was relaxed, scrolling on my phone, when suddenly, everything around me went weird. The room got cold in this really unnatural way. Not like, oh, the AC's too strong, but like the warmth got sucked out of everything. My hands felt numb, the air got heavy, and my screen just froze. The podcast stopped by itself, the image glitched, and then the screen went completely black. But the audio kept going for a second. Just this distorted whispering from my speakers, like the voices were far away and underwater. Then that cut out too. I remember staring at the dark screen thinking, okay, that was odd. And this really uncomfortable feeling settled in my chest, like I wasn't alone in the room. I tried to shake it off, finished another random video, and then decided to go out to the plaza with my friends, just to clear my head. That night, when I finally went to bed, that feeling came back. My mattress felt stiff, like I was lying on a wooden board. My blanket suddenly felt rough, almost scratchy, and my pillows were hard, like rocks. It's such a small detail, but it made me feel really wrong in my own bed. It took me forever to fall asleep. Now, I'm a super heavy sleeper. I almost never wake up in the middle of the night. But that night, I did. I opened my eyes and realized something was off immediately. My whole room was in black and white, like one of those old movies. No color at all. I tried to move and realized I couldn't. I was completely paralyzed. I could move my eyes, and after forcing it, I could barely turn my head, but my body was stuck. Then I noticed it. On the metal beam across my ceiling, perched like some kind of grotesque bird, there was this black, shapeless figure. It reminded me of a gargoyle, but made of shadow, with these bright red eyes that glowed like embers. It wasn't moving, it was just looking at me. I told myself, okay, this is sleep paralysis. You've seen TikToks about this. It's not real. Just ignore it. But it felt real. The way it tilted its head, the weight of its stare, the cold in the room. Everything felt too real. It watched me for what felt like a long time, and then everything snapped. I jolted awake, this time really awake, and the colors were back. I could move again. I grabbed my phone. It was 3:03 a.m. The next day was normal, technically. I went about my usual routine, but I felt dull, like someone had turned down the brightness on me. I was distracted, slow, a bit numb. I didn't really tell anyone what happened. I just tried to pretend it was a bad dream. That night, though, things got worse. I have this little mixed breed dog named Coco who sleeps in my room. Usually he curls up and knocks out, no problem. But that night, he kept growling at the wall across from my bed. Not the window, not the door, just this one spot on the wall. He wouldn't take his eyes off it. His fur was standing on end, and he kept giving these low, warning growls, like he was staring at something I couldn't see. I tried to calm him down, eventually fell asleep. And again, I woke up in the middle of the night. At first, I saw nothing. Then, slowly, a shape appeared near the wall where my dog had been growling. It was a tall, dark silhouette, like a man made of shadow, with those same red eyes. Not glowing bright, just burning quietly. He didn't have clear facial features, just the outline of a man and those eyes. He lifted one hand toward me, not fast, not aggressive, just a slow, deliberate motion, like he was reaching out. And then I snapped awake. I grabbed my phone again. 3:03 a.m. Exactly. By the third day, I was exhausted. I felt drained, heavy, kind of depressed. I slept a lot during the day, and by night, I was already bracing myself for whatever was going to happen. That night, I woke up paralyzed again, but this time, my vision was normal. I saw my room in full color, my posters, my blanket, the little glow from the streetlight coming through the window. Everything looked like it always does. But the air was freezing, and it felt thick, like it was hard to breathe it in. I blinked once. When I opened my eyes again, he was there. This time, he wasn't just a shadow. He looked human. He was standing at the foot of my bed, a little to the side. He looked like he was in his mid-20s maybe, tall, around 6'3", dark brown hair, similar to mine. His skin was pale, almost too pale, and his eyes were bright red, but clearer now, like glowing glass instead of just light. He was dressed in black from head to toe, black shirt, black pants, and this long, elegant trench coat that made him look like he'd stepped out of some gothic movie. But weirdly, he didn't scare me the way you'd think. I felt like I knew him from somewhere. There was this strange familiarity, like seeing someone you haven't met but somehow recognize. He walked slowly around my bed, not getting too close, just circling until he stood beside me. Then he spoke. "Do you know me?" he asked. His voice was hoarse, cold, but not threatening, just empty. And here's the strange part. My mouth answered before my mind did. "Yes," I said, but it didn't feel like I chose to say it. My lips moved on their own. He gave a small nod. "Perfect," he replied. After that, we talked. Or, I think we did. I have this feeling we had a whole conversation, but I can't remember it. It's like my brain refuses to let me bring the details back. I only remember the end. He straightened up a little, like we'd just finished discussing something important, and said, "Well, that's what we'll leave it at. That's our pact." And again, my mouth moved on its own. "Yes," I answered. He took a step toward the door and added, "Until next time." When he reached the door, he stopped, turned around, and lifted his hand in a small wave. And for the first time, he smiled at me. Not a big smile, just a subtle, almost gentle one. Then he opened the door. The moment it clicked, I woke up. This time, I wasn't gasping or panicking. I was calm, weirdly calm. I looked at my phone. 3:03 a.m. again. After that, nothing big like that ever happened again. No more full-on visits in the middle of the night. No more black and white vision. But ever since then, I felt like I'm not alone. In dark places, especially in hallways or stairwells, I get this very specific sensation, like someone is standing just behind me, watching. You know when you know someone's eyes are on you, even if you can't see them? It's like that. And then there's the really strange part. People who hurt me, make fun of me, or treat me badly. Something always happens to them. Not immediately, not like some movie curse. But a little while later, they'll get sick, or have some accident, or suddenly go through a rough patch. At first, I thought it was just coincidence. But after a while, it stopped feeling like coincidence. It started feeling like someone was keeping score. Sometimes I joke about it and say I must have a guardian demon instead of a guardian angel. I laugh when I say it, but deep down, I'm not completely joking. I've only told this story once before, to a small group of close friends. We were sharing weird experiences, and I decided to finally tell them about my pact. That same night, something happened. I was walking home, and there was this cold breeze that hit the back of my neck. Not the usual night air kind of chill, but that same cold I felt in my room those nights. It made me stop in my tracks. I turned my head toward where the wind felt like it was coming from. Down the street, there was only one streetlight on. Everything else was dim, but that one lamp was casting a perfect circle of light on the pavement. And in the middle of that circle stood someone. Tall, dark coat, head slightly tilted. Even from far away, I recognized him. Not with my eyes, but with that same strange familiarity in my chest. It was him. Those red eyes, subtle but unmistakable, were fixed on me. He didn't move closer. He just stood there under the light, watching. Then he lifted his hand and waved, just like he did that night in my room. I froze. I don't even think I breathed. He gave me a small, almost playful smile. I blinked, just once, and when my eyes opened again, the circle of light was empty. The street light was still on, but he was gone. And now, while I'm telling you all this, I'm getting that same feeling again. The air around me is colder than it should be. I checked the temperature earlier. It's stupidly hot outside, but my arms are covered in goosebumps. And as I look at the screen, it feels like someone else is looking at it with me. Not behind me, not in front of me, right over my shoulder. So if, after hearing this, you suddenly feel a chill or get the sense that someone is standing just out of sight, don't worry too much. He's probably just saying hello to you too. So, let me take you back for a minute. There's this park in Western Australia, right on the edge of the city. Back then, it was the sort of place people drifted to after clubbing, or when the night was too hot and sticky to bear inside. Some folks went there to cruise, some to talk, some just to breathe and come down. If you know, you know. But that's not really what I'm here to talk about. For me, that park was like a second bedroom. Sometimes I'd be there with friends, sitting around under the big old trees, sharing cigarettes and stories. Other times, I'd wander off on my own and sit by one of the two lakes, watching the turtles and the frogs, or whatever else decided to show up. It was unofficially social, you know? You never quite knew who you'd bump into along the paths or by the water. This particular night, though, I was alone. It was the late 80s, edging into the early 90s, a strange in-between time. A lot of us were playing with different spiritual paths, Wicca, earth magic, tarot cards that smelled like incense, crystals warmed from being worn inside shirts. We were young and so sure the world was still opening, that magic meant anything was possible. I was about 22 then, still carrying that naive kind of bravery. So that night, I'd just gotten up off the grass near the lake and started walking up one of my favorite paths. I'd walked that path so many times, I could have told you every dip in the ground, every low branch, every tree root that tried to catch your toes. But that night was different. There was this fog, a low, knee-high fog I'd never seen there before. It blanketed everything, the grass, the water, the paths, like the park had slipped into a dream. The trees along the path were subtropical and a bit wild. Paper barks, pink peppercorn vines, and those massive Moreton Bay figs, their roots twisting out of the earth like old bones. Some of the roots were big enough that, if you were tired or a bit out of it, you could curl up and sleep inside them. The air was hot and completely still, no breeze at all. The trees rose up out of this flat sheet of mist, like they were growing from a cloud instead of from soil. And the fog, this is the part that really stuck with me. It stopped sharply at the edges of the park. It didn't spill onto the sidewalks or the streets. It just ended, right where the city lights began, like someone had drawn a line. There was a weird silence, too. Not total silence, but sort of hushed. Every now and then I'd pass a frog or see a turtle near the path, just sitting there, not moving, like even the animals were waiting for something to happen. This was my playground, my sanctuary. I knew its quirks, but as I walked up that trail, past each big fig tree, I started to feel like the ground itself was unfamiliar. The twisted roots, the humps and hollows of earth, they felt alive somehow. I kept catching movement in the corner of my eye, and I couldn't tell if it was the mist stirring or the actual trees shifting just outside my direct vision. And I kept telling myself, don't be ridiculous. Trees don't move. You're just spooking yourself. I almost forgot to mention the moon. That night, it was a waxy new moon, but bright, sharp. Moonlight lit the whole park, the lakes, the trees, that strange low fog. It wasn't dark at all. It was washed in silver. About halfway up the trail, I stopped. I hadn't meant to. My body just paused. I blinked and squinted, leaning forward a little as I noticed something between the roots of one of the bigger fig trees. There was a shape lying there, tucked into the space between two massive roots. But as I walked a little closer, my certainty started to fall apart. The shape was too human. It had a head, shoulders, a torso, clearly a body. But something was wrong with the proportions, or the way it was connected to the ground. It was like a puzzle I couldn't quite solve. I suddenly thought, what if it's someone hurt? What if he's passed out? What if he's been beaten up? That kind of thing happened there sometimes, by police, by random thugs, by people looking to punish what they didn't understand. So my concern kicked in, but under it, there was this unease, like a quiet alarm. I thought I could see his hands gripping the knotted roots, like he was holding on to something solid. But when I really looked, my eyes couldn't quite find the point where his hands ended and the wood began. It was as if they blurred into each other. Again, I told myself, it's just pareidolia. You're seeing patterns where there aren't any. It's just roots. It's just fog. I got closer. I bent my knees a little, trying to bring my eyes level with him. I wanted what I was seeing to make sense. I needed it to be something ordinary. A drunk guy, a hallucination, anything I could explain later. Then I realized his head was lowered, but turned just slightly, in my direction. That's when he looked up. Our eyes met. For a moment, everything stopped. It was like the whole night held its breath. I felt a flash of surprise, maybe even shock, on both our faces. Funny thing is, the first feeling I had wasn't fear. It was more like, oh, this is real. In that suspended second, I saw him clearly. He was male, or at least, that's the closest word I have. but he wasn't human. His skin, if you can call it that, had this glistening quality. Not wet, not like slime, but like the sheen you sometimes see on leaves when the moon hits them just right. And he wasn't separate from the tree. It was like he and the fig were part of the same living thing. Roots, bark, and being all woven together. His eyes were beautiful, almond-shaped, like a cat's or a lizard's, and a soft yellow, almost golden. They were sharp, but not cruel. His face didn't look monstrous. He looked kind, actually. Kind and very, very sad. For a breath, I felt surprisingly calm, like he was holding me there in this quiet, gentle space. There was no sense of threat, just this deep, ancient sadness looking back at me. And then something primal inside me snapped on. You know that part of you that doesn't care about logic or kindness, that only knows stay or run? That part woke up. I still don't know if it was warning me, or if it just couldn't cope with how far outside the usual this was. All these years later, I still ask myself, should I have stayed? Could I have helped him somehow? Was I meant to do something? Or was I about to walk into real danger and my body knew before my mind did? I'll never know. Because I ran. I broke eye contact, turned, and bolted back down that path, down through the fog, past the silent turtles and the still water, all the way back to the edges of the park, where the mist just stopped and the city lights felt harsh and reassuring. I didn't look back. I wish I had more to tell you. I wish I had some grand message or conversation or proof. But all I have is that moment, those eyes, that glistening tree-twined body, that sadness, and the certainty that he was real. My conclusion, for what it's worth, is this. He was one of the many forms of life sharing this planet with us. Not metaphorically, literally. One of the beings the old stories were talking about long before we filed them under myth and folklore. Somewhere along the line, we started calling all of that just stories. But that night, alone in that foggy park under a bright young moon, I looked into the eyes of something that wasn't supposed to exist, and it looked back at me. Our world is magical. I think the real question isn't whether these beings are still here. It's this. What does it do to us, to our hearts, to our spirits, when we forget them? So, my story with the supernatural really starts the year my grandma from my mom's side passed away. I was in 7th grade then. We flew down to Mexico after not visiting for like 3 or 5 years. It had been a while. We went to this small town near the coast where my mom grew up. I remember walking into my grandma's old house and seeing cousins I barely recognized, uncles, aunts, family friends. All these people who loved her and were helping my mom sort out the house so it could eventually be sold. My grandma, let's call her Abuela Rosa, had just been buried. After the funeral and all the prayers and food and stories, we came back home to the States. And that's when I saw my mom, loose, break in a way I had never seen before. She cried constantly. I'd come home from school and my dad, Jorge, would be like, "Hey, grab your backpack. We're going to your Tia Elena's for a bit." He didn't want me just sitting there watching my mom sob all afternoon. She was always the strong one, you know? The one who handled everything. Suddenly she was just shattered. And that alone is scary when you're a kid. One afternoon, my mom started going through my grandma's things. Old photos, little knickknacks, jewelry, the rosaries, some shawls that still smelled like her perfume. I remember watching her pull out this one book from the bottom of a box. It was weird looking. The cover was this faded brown, and in the center there was this symbol, an eye inside a pyramid. The whole thing was in Spanish, and my Spanish was pretty basic back then, so I had no idea what it said. My mom stared at it for a long time. Later that night, she told me what it was about. A book on how to communicate with the dead. She said it almost like a confession. She missed her mom so much that when she realized what the book was, she took it as a sign. She told me she was going to try to talk to Abuela Rosa. So she started following the instructions. Most nights looked kind of the same. My mom would light a candle in the living room, sit in front of this little table with the crucifix, and whisper some words from the book. Then she'd go quiet. The first night, nothing happened. Second night, same thing. Silence. Just the sound of the AC humming and the candle flickering. By the third night, a few things in the house had changed. We had put up pictures of all the family members who had passed away on one wall in the living room. My grandpa, Abuelo Ignacio, some great-grandparents, a cousin who died young. And now we'd added a framed photo of my grandma right next to the crucifix. That night, it was around 10 p.m. My mom did her little ritual again. Candle, prayers, quiet. I was in my room, half doing homework, half zoning out, when I heard it. Bang. It wasn't just some tiny creak. It sounded like someone hitting the wall with their fist. Then another. Bang. My dad got up to check. I remember hearing him walk down the hallway, all annoyed, thinking maybe something had just fallen. Then he called my mom over, and the tone of his voice changed. So I went too. My grandma's picture was no longer on the wall. It was on the floor in the middle of the living room, face up, the glass shattered. Not near the wall, not leaning on anything, just there, like it had been flung forward. And all the other framed pictures? Completely untouched. Still, they did what parents do. They tried to rationalize it for my sake. They fixed the frame, put in new glass, and my dad reinforced all the nails in the wall. Hammered them in deeper, made sure everything was solid. My mom decided that, instead of trying to talk to my grandma again, she would try speaking to my grandpa, who had died exactly 2 years before her. I never really understood why she switched, but in her mind, maybe he'd be stronger on the other side or something. That same night, she tries again. Candle, book, whispered prayers. And then, again, this huge bang, then the sound of glass breaking. We ran into the living room, and it was my grandpa's picture this time. His frame was on the floor, glass everywhere, but the nail was still in the wall, perfectly fine. The frame somehow ended up further to the left, closer to my parents' bedroom door, like it had been thrown. My mom was done after that. She closed the book, said, "No mas," and put it in a box in the hallway closet. I could tell she was scared in a different way now, not just sad. And I was starting to feel like something had been invited in and did not want to leave. That's when things got personal. I started hearing my name being called. At first, I thought it was just normal kid stuff. You know, you think you hear your mom call you, but she didn't. I'd be in my room and hear, clear as day, "Oye, ven aquí," in my mom's voice. I'd go to the kitchen, no one. I'd hear my dad's voice calling my name, go to their room, and he'd be knocked out snoring. This kept happening. For a while, I told myself it was just my imagination, or maybe the TV, or neighbors. I didn't want to be the paranoid kid jumping at every sound. But deep down, I knew something was off. Then came the night that really messed me up. My parents had a couples retreat with our church that went from 6 to 11 p.m. It wasn't unusual. They trusted me to be okay for a few hours at home. I was excited, honestly. More time for movies and video games. So I finished watching a superhero movie. Pretty sure it was one of the Spider-Man movies, on DVD in the living room. After it ended, I turned off the TV, switched off the main light, and stayed on the couch with just this small lamp on in the corner. I pulled out my old iPod and started scrolling through videos and memes. That's when I felt it. You know when someone stares at you from across a room and you just know? Your body picks it up before your brain does. I got this sudden chill, like a cold hand on the back of my neck. The air felt heavier, if that makes any sense. I tried to ignore it at first. I pulled my feet up on the couch and wrapped my arms around my knees. The house started making little noises, the fridge, the AC clicking on, normal stuff, but it all sounded too loud. I got nervous enough that I picked up the house phone and called my parents. I told my mom, "Hey, I feel weird. I think someone's in the house." She tried to calm me down, saying it was just my nerves, that they'd be home soon. While she was talking, I looked over toward the kitchen, and the chairs moved. We had these two swivel bar stools at the counter that separates the kitchen from the living room. I watched one of them jerk like someone had kicked it. Then it slid, hard, right into my leg, like it was trying to push me off the couch. The other chair tipped over and hit the floor. The sound was so loud in that quiet house, I almost dropped the phone. My mom's voice faded into the background because at that point I was just frozen. It looked and felt like a scene from a haunted house movie, except I was the one in it. And then I heard it again. My name, called from just to my left. I turned my head, slowly, and that's when I saw her. All the horror movies I'd ever watched hit me at once. I just bolted. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor and cracked. I ran straight to my parents' bedroom, slammed the door, and locked it. I was shaking so hard I had trouble turning the lock. And then the banging started. Someone, something, pounded on the other side of the door. Not polite knocking, full-on, angry hits. I backed up against the far wall, sliding down onto the floor, crying, struggling to breathe. It felt like that moment would never end. Then, suddenly, the noise stopped. The house went quiet again. That silence was almost worse. After what felt like forever, but was probably around 9 or 10 minutes, I heard my parents' car pull up. The front door opened. I heard my mom call my name, this time for real. I cracked the bedroom door open and ran to them. The house was a mess. The chairs knocked over, the broken phone on the floor, the bar stool shoved away from the counter. They didn't see anybody else, of course. Just their kid, shaking, hyperventilating, crying like my life had just been ripped open. After that night, the weirdness didn't stop right away. It kind of moved into my dreams. I started having nightmares, really vivid ones, where I was in this gray forest, like everything was covered in fog. And there were other versions of me in there. They'd chase me, corner me, and do horrible things. I won't go into detail, but I'd wake up feeling dirty, terrified, and exhausted, like my soul had been chewed up. When my uncle, Tio Mateo, heard what had been going on, he got involved. In our culture, he's known as a kind of curandero, a healer. He came over with herbs, holy water, candles, and eggs. He had all of us stand still while he prayed and rubbed the eggs over our bodies, one by one. Then he cracked them into glasses of water. I remember seeing the yolks twist and darken in these strange shapes. Some parts looked almost black, with weird little strings in them. He shook his head like, yeah, something's not right here. Our priest from church also came by to bless the house. He walked room to room, sprinkling holy water on the walls, the doorways, the photos. He prayed over the living room, especially near that wall with all the pictures. Slowly, things calmed down. No more voices calling my name. No more banging on the walls. The nightmares faded. The house felt like a home again and not whatever it had become. Years later, I was a lot older. This was around 2017. I was cleaning out a closet, and guess what I found? That book. Same faded cover, same eye inside the pyramid. The moment I saw it, all those memories hit me like a wave. The broken frames, the chairs moving, that thing wearing my grandma's face. I didn't even open it. I took it outside that weekend when some friends and I had a bonfire, and I used it as kindling. Watched it catch and curl up into ash. It was strangely satisfying, like I was closing a door that should have never been opened. And the truth is, even after all these years, about 14 of them now, I still don't know what that spirit was. Was it something my mom accidentally invited in with that book? Was it just grief twisting reality around us? Was it something that latched onto my family for a while? I don't have answers. All I know is, it felt real. It left a mark. And every time I hear a random knock in a quiet house, a tiny part of me is back in that living room, looking at a broken picture frame on the floor, wondering who or what threw it. I've just started seeing this guy, right? Let's call him Noah. We're a few dates in, still in that getting to really know each other phase. One night we're at his place, just curled up on his tiny, squeaky couch, talking about absolutely nothing important. Work, bad movies, what we'd eat if calories didn't exist forever. And then his phone, which is just sitting on the coffee table, suddenly slides a few inches across the surface. Like, no vibration, no notification, nothing. We both watch it move. I kind of laugh and go, did you see that? And without missing a beat, he sighs and says, yeah, my apartment does stuff like that all the time. I'm pretty sure it's haunted. Now I'm wide awake. He starts telling me about weird things that have been happening. Lights flickering, doors creaking open on their own, hearing footsteps when he's home alone. You know how it is. One spooky thing leads to another, and suddenly we're trading ghost stories instead of flirting. Then he goes, okay, actually, I've got one for you. The creepiest thing that's ever happened to me. And I can see his face change. He's still Noah, still relaxed, but there's this seriousness in his eyes like he's about to pull up a memory he really doesn't visit often. This was back when I was in high school, he says. His parents had gone out of town for the weekend, so he'd basically had the house to himself. He'd invited his friend Marco over, and they were doing what bored teenage boys do, playing video games, drinking cheap beer they definitely weren't supposed to have, talking trash, staying up too late. Eventually, Marco went home, and the house got really quiet. A little while later, Noah's high school girlfriend, Lena, called the house phone, which already dates the story, right? She sounded upset and told him, we need to talk. I'm coming over. So he's just sitting there on the couch in the living room, TV on low, waiting for her to show up. After a few minutes, there's a knock at the front door. He gets up, walks over, opens it, and there's no one there. The porch is empty. The street is completely still. No car pulling away, no footsteps, just silence. He stands there for a second, confused, and then kind of shrugs it off. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe the old door just sounded like a knock. He closes the door, locks it, and goes back to the couch. He's about to sit down when, out of the corner of his eye, he sees something move. Just a shadow at first. You know that feeling when your brain hasn't caught up yet, but your body knows something's wrong? So he turns his head, and there, standing a few feet in front of the couch, is a man. A full-grown man. Not blurry, not see-through, just there. The man is wearing a black suit and a crisp white shirt with a dark tie. His hair is slicked back, neat, almost old-fashioned, and he's just smiling. Not a friendly smile, not a big, creepy grin, just this small, fixed smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Noah tells me he froze. He didn't scream, didn't run. He just stared at this man who had absolutely no business being in his living room. The air felt heavy, he said. The way he described it, it was like the room had suddenly gotten thicker, like sound would have to push through the air to get out. He's locked eyes with this stranger, and it feels like forever, like they're both just standing there, Noah on the edge of the couch and this man in the suit, staring. Then, there's another knock at the door. A sharp, loud, very real knock. He doesn't see him leave. He doesn't hear anything. He's just gone. Noah stumbles to the front door, yanks it open, and this time it's Lena, standing there on the porch, arms crossed, looking annoyed and nervous. He drags her inside and starts telling her everything, talking way too fast. The empty doorway, the man in the suit, the way it felt wrong. She listens, but she kind of rolls her eyes and chalks it up to him being drunk and alone and spooked in a big, empty house. She doesn't believe him. Life goes on. He doesn't tell a lot of people about it, but the image of that man in the suit, just standing there, smiling, stays burned into his mind. Fast forward a bit. One afternoon, he's visiting his grandmother, his abuela, over at her little house. She mostly speaks Spanish, and his Spanish isn't great, but they manage. They're sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, when he suddenly remembers that night and decides to tell her about it. He starts describing what happened, stumbling over words in Spanish. He tells her that he was alone, that someone knocked, that no one was there, that a man in a suit appeared in his living room. He doesn't even get to the part about the smile before her face changes. She sets her cup down, looks at him very seriously, and says, in Spanish, "Es el diablo. Es el diablo." That's the devil. That's the devil. He's startled and asks her what she means, and that's when she tells him her own story. Back when she was young, living in a small town in northern Mexico, she and her friends used to go out dancing at this popular nightclub on the edge of town. It had a name like El Paraíso, Paradise, one of those places with colored lights and music spilling out into the street. One night, she and two of her girlfriends went there like usual. The place was crowded, music was loud, everyone was drinking and laughing and dancing. While they were at the bar, this incredibly handsome man approached them. She remembers this very clearly. He was wearing a dark suit, not flashy, just sharp, fitted, like he'd stepped straight out of a movie. He was charming, well-spoken, confident. He bought them drinks, made them laugh, the whole cliché. One of her friends, Rosa, was instantly taken with him. You know when you can tell when someone's already decided, yeah, I like this one? It was like that. But the other friend, Camila, got quiet. She leaned over to Noah's grandmother and whispered, "Something's wrong. Don't look at his face. Look at his legs." Now that's not a normal sentence you hear every day. So his grandmother, curious and a little unnerved, glances down. And that's when she sees it. The man is wearing perfectly normal dress pants, but the outline underneath isn't right. She said that one leg looked thin and bony, like a bird's, like a scrawny chicken leg. The other leg had this strange curve to it, like the hind leg of an animal, bent in a way a human leg shouldn't be. almost like a goat's leg. She can feel her skin crawling even as she's telling the story to Noah decades later. Panicking, she nudges Camila and mutters that they should go to the bathroom, come up with an excuse to leave, something. Rosa, meanwhile, is still completely charmed, laughing at this man's jokes, leaning closer to him at the bar. So his grandmother and Camila tell Rosa, "We'll be right back," and they leave her there with him while they rush to the bathroom, hearts pounding. And then, in the middle of their whispered panic, they hear it. Screaming. Not the fun kind of screaming you hear in a club when a favorite song comes on. Real, blood-chilling screaming. People shouting, chairs scraping, glass breaking. They yank the bathroom door open. The club is chaos. People are shoving past each other, trying to get out. There's smoke. Someone yells that there's a fire. They can see flames starting to crawl up the curtains near the stage, then licking across the ceiling. Everything is moving too fast. The music has stopped, but the ringing in their ears is so loud that it feels like it's still playing. His grandmother and Camilla are pushed outside with the crowd, coughing, eyes burning. They stumble into the street, disoriented, and when they finally catch their breath, they realize something. They can't find Rosa. They search the crowd. They call her name. No one's seen her. No one remembers the man in the suit clearly enough to describe him. Some people don't even remember noticing him at all. The fire department comes. The club burns hard and fast. By morning, it's mostly a charred shell. And Rosa, the friend who'd stayed at the bar with the handsome stranger in the suit, is never seen again. Not that night. Not the next day. Not ever. No body is found that they can identify as hers. No one hears from her. She just disappears. His grandmother tells Noah that for years afterward, people in that town whispered about it. Some said the fire was just an accident. Some said it was something darker. More than a few said the same thing. The man in the suit was the devil, walking around in plain sight. So when Noah told her about his man in the suit, smiling at him in his empty house, she didn't hesitate. "Es el diablo," she said. "He likes to show himself, just enough so you remember." Noah finishes telling me all this, sitting beside me on that same squeaky couch where his phone had just slid across the table on its own. And we're both quiet for a moment. The room feels different. The shadows feel a little heavier in the corners. I can hear the refrigerator humming, the pipes in the wall ticking, every tiny house noise suddenly amplified. He gives a small, nervous laugh and says, "So, yeah, that's why I don't love being here alone at night." I just look at him and say, "Okay, well, if your house is haunted, your ghosts are way too dramatic." But I'll be honest with you, ever since he told me that story, anytime I catch a glimpse of someone in the corner of my eye, like a reflection in a dark window or a shape at the end of a hallway, I always check what they're wearing. And if I ever see a man in a suit just standing there, smiling for no reason, I'm not sticking around to find out who he is. So, let me tell you about the one night that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. A couple of years ago, I worked at this haunted attraction in rural Delaware called Nightfall Acres. I was there for a season, working on the hayride, specifically the clown tent scene. It was either 2020 or 2021, one of those foggy years where everything kind of blends together. During the rush, it was chaos. Screaming guests, chainsaws, laughter, the whole thing. But in between hayrides, we'd get these short breaks. On the side of the tent, there was this little area where I could stash my jacket, my cigarettes, a bottle of water, and just sit for a minute. You know, catch my breath, scroll my phone, decompress. Right across from that little rest spot was a wide stretch of trees. There was this narrow dirt path, or maybe a golf cart trail running in front of the woods. From where I sat, I had a clear view of that path. One night, October 23rd, I'm pretty sure. It was late, maybe around 10:30 or 11 p.m. The moon was really bright, brighter than usual, like someone had turned up the contrast on the whole scene. The woods across from me were surprisingly well lit for how late it was. I was sitting there, smoking, looking down at my phone. Just another break between hay rides. Then, for no particular reason, I looked up. And that's when I saw it. Something huge and completely white was walking along the trail in front of the trees. At first, my brain didn't know what to do with it. It was on 4 legs, but it didn't move like a normal animal. At the shoulders, it had to be 8 or 9 feet tall. It had this strange, almost gliding gait, like each step was too smooth, too controlled, but still somehow wrong. The closest thing I can compare it to are those spirit walker costumes that were floating around online for a while, with the tall, stilted legs. Except this didn't look like a costume. It didn't bounce or wobble. It just flowed. I froze, completely. I've been startled plenty of times at haunted attractions, actors jumping out, props falling, all that. But this was different. This was the kind of fear that makes your body go silent inside. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I just watched. The way it looked was even stranger. Its body seemed to shift as it walked. Sometimes it looked sharp and angular, almost polygonal, like something out of an early video game. Then it would seem softer, the edges blurring, like it was losing shape and then pulling itself back together. It was moving slowly, maybe 2 or 3 miles an hour, just strolling down the trail like it had all the time in the world. I watched it for what felt like forever. In reality, it was probably a minute, maybe a minute and a half. Long enough to really see it. Long enough that I can still replay it in my head, frame by frame. Every so often, it would turn and look in my direction. When it did, I realized it had no face. No eyes, no mouth, nothing. Just a smooth, blank surface where something's features should have been. And every time it looked at me, even without eyes, I felt this wave of anxiety crash over me, like my body was screaming at me to run, but I just couldn't. Eventually, it kept walking and slipped out of my line of sight behind some trees. The second it disappeared, it was like my body came back online. I jumped up and bolted to the other side of the clown tent, where a couple of my coworkers were hanging out. People like Mia and Tyler, who'd been there longer than me. I was out of breath, trying to explain what I'd just seen. I remember my voice shaking, my hands still buzzing with adrenaline. They listened, and I could tell they were unsettled, but I don't know if they fully believed me. I mean, I get it. We work at a haunted attraction, right? Costumes and weird props are kind of the whole point. Even I tried to talk myself out of it. I kept thinking, okay, maybe it was just someone in some crazy costume I hadn't seen yet. Maybe it was part of a new bit, or a test scare on the trail. But here's the thing. There was nothing out in that direction. No set, no scare zone. No reason for someone to be walking that far out, especially in full costume, on a muddy trail, in the dark, with no audience. At the end of the night, I went straight to my manager. Let's call him Rick, who also owned the place. I asked him if we had any costumes that looked like a tall, all-white, faceless creature. I tried to describe the movement, the height, the way it looked under the moonlight. He just shook his head and said, "No, nothing like that. Not even close." Over the next few days, I told a few people who'd worked there for years about what I'd seen. A couple of them got really quiet, and then admitted they'd seen something similar in that same general area. This weird, white, too tall thing that didn't move like a person. Hearing that didn't make me feel better. If anything, it made it worse. To this day, that image is burned into my memory. That enormous, matte white shape moving down the trail, shifting and faceless, looking my way without eyes. Even talking about it now makes me uncomfortable. There's this part of me that's genuinely afraid I might see it again someday, like I somehow ended up on its radar. And I really, truly hope I never do. I've scared a lot of people on purpose working those haunted attractions, but that night, I was the one who got haunted. So, my dad's side of the family has always been very spiritual, but not religious at all. You know the type. Crystals on the windowsill, dreams that mean something, that whole vibe. A lot of them have their own ghost stories or moments with the beyond. I've always been pretty skeptical, but there's this itch in the back of my mind that never totally goes away. So I figured, why not tell you? My great-grandma, her name was Elena, was a survivor of World War II. She fled her home in Lithuania when everything started falling apart. I don't know all the details. My parents were really tight-lipped about that part of the family history, and honestly, pretty fiercely conservative and closed off about anything that made them emotional. So all I really have are fragments. Elena's son, my grandfather Jonas, ended up marrying my grandma, Marion. Now, my grandma is a character. She claims she has Native American heritage, but she also tells these wild, dramatic stories that always made me kind of squint and go, really though? One of those stories used to haunt my dreams as a kid. She'd talk about this old farmhouse she lived in for a while. According to her, one night she was there completely alone, just her and the dogs. She said she was lying in bed, drifting off, when she felt this very clear tap on her hip. Not like a cramp, not the blanket shifting, an actual tap, like a fingertip. In my head, I always pictured her on a top bunk bed for some reason, even though she never said that. I think it's because I slept on the top bunk above my little brother for years, so I would imagine her in my place, someone or something underneath. She'd tell the story with such intensity. Her voice would drop, her eyes would get big, and by the time she got to the moment where she froze in bed and didn't dare turn around, my brother and I would be staring at each other, mouths open, completely hooked. We didn't realize that being breathless and spooked was exactly the reaction she was aiming for. Later on, I had my own, let's call it a maybe paranormal moment. We lived for a while in this housing development that everyone said was built near old indigenous burial grounds. You know how cities like to lean into creepy local legends if there's money in it? Ours definitely did. There were plaques, little historical tour blurbs, the whole thing. One afternoon, I was going up the stairs to my Aunt Denise's place. Halfway up, I froze. At the top of the stairs, just standing there, I saw this little native girl. She was holding a small doll in one arm, and she was looking right at me. Not angry, not smiling, just focused. There was this feeling, like she was trying to warn me about something. I wish I could tell you exactly what it was, but the message is just gone. All I remember is the fear, and not a fun campfire story fear either. It went straight into my bones. Now, I was a kid who loved mysteries and weirdness, but this shook me enough that I actually told the adults. And they didn't laugh. They went quiet. They listened. They nodded. They told me my older cousin Aaron had seen the same girl on those stairs years before. Same age, same doll, same staircase. That was it. That was all I needed to hear. Instantly, it became real for me. Capital R, real. From there, I dove headfirst into everything paranormal. Ghost shows, creepy books, urban legends. I was all in. I questioned everything, but in a way that was excited, not skeptical. I wanted the world to be full of hidden doors and secret messages. I'm older, a little more grounded. And one day, the truth kind of slips out. The same people who had encouraged my paranormal obsession, the ones who told me, "It's all real, you're so sensitive, you can see things other people can't." Yeah, turns out a lot of it was a joke to them. They admitted, laughing, that they had played along because I believed so hard. That it was hilarious how seriously I took it. And that some of the stories I'd been told, and even the confirmations of my own experiences, were just them messing with me. "Come on, it's funny, right?" they said. I didn't think it was funny. And the thing is, not everything came from them. Some things I experienced on my own. Like my dad's brother, my Uncle Marco. He told me a story that my dad still swears is true. When they were younger, they were driving back late at night to the old family place, this creaky farmhouse out in the country. As they pulled up, they looked toward the kitchen window and saw their grandmother, my Grandma Lydia on their mom's side, at the sink. They said she was washing dishes exactly the way she always did, one dish at a time, scrubbing with a little scouring pad, then holding it up to the light to check for a shine. They watched her do this for a few seconds from the car. But here's the thing. She had died months before. They rushed inside, calling out to her, flipping on lights, checking the kitchen, the hallway, the bedrooms. Nothing. House completely empty. They still tell that story like it's just a simple fact. Like, yeah, that happened. End of discussion. And then there's my own weirdness that didn't involve anyone else at all. Once, when I was a teenager, my friends and I decided to go explore this road that everyone in town said was spiritually active. It used to be a main road, but it had fallen into disrepair, and people mostly avoided it. Of course, we heard that and went, "Perfect, let's go at night." We walked that cracked, overgrown road under the stars, taking pictures with our cheap little cameras and phones. There was this heavy feeling in the air, like the silence was pressing in on us. And I remember telling them, "I don't know what it is, but something is walking with us." Later, when we looked at the photos, we noticed something strange. In almost every picture that I was in, there was this bright orb of light hovering near me. Not dust, not a lens flare that showed up in every shot. Only the photos where I was standing there, a little blob of light right beside me or just over my shoulder. Pictures without me, no orb. It was like something had decided to be my +1 on that midnight walk. And then there's the part I still don't really know how to talk about without feeling a little ridiculous. People close to me tell me I predict things. Like I'll say, "I bet so-and-so is going to call in the next hour," and then they do. Or I'll dream about something oddly specific, and then it plays out in real life a few days later. Or I'll know something about a situation that no one has told me, but I'll just say it, and it's right. For most of my life, I wrote it off as instinct, or pattern recognition, or just being really observant. You can explain a lot with those things, honestly. But lately, it's gotten harder to completely deny that there might be something else going on. Some other sense, just barely humming under the surface. So here I am, skeptical, a little bit bruised from being the butt of the joke, but still carrying these stories around with me. I don't know if that girl on the stairs was real, or if my brain stitched something together from fear and local legends. I don't know if my grandma really felt that tap on her hip, or if my uncles truly saw their dead grandmother at the sink. What I do know is how real it all felt. To them. To me. To the kid who just wanted adults to take them seriously. And to the adult who still feels something tug at the edge of her awareness now and then. Maybe it's all stories. Maybe it's all neurons firing in weird patterns. Or maybe, just maybe, there's a little more light on the staircase than we're willing to admit. So, this happened about 4 months ago, around 7 p.m. At the time, I was staying with my older cousin and his family, helping out at his little electronics shop during a long break from university. Most evenings I'd walk home, and instead of taking the short, busy road, I'd deliberately choose the long, winding one. Not for the scenery, for privacy. That's the route I use when I want to smoke without my cousin's wife finding out. It's usually quiet, just a few scattered houses, some overgrown bushes, and the occasional motorbike passing by. The kind of road where you can hear your own footsteps and your own thoughts a little too clearly. That evening, I passed my friend Musa, who runs this tiny juice stand along the way. We just did a quick greeting, one of those, "You good?" nods. Nothing strange, nothing heavy. The sky was already dimming, that soft blue-gray right before it turns properly dark. You know that time of day when the streetlights are thinking about turning on, but haven't yet? I kept walking. Now, normally, if I see someone coming toward me, I'll wait before lighting up. I really don't want anyone recognizing me, and then somehow that story traveling all the way back home. But that day, there were 2 people on the road. One guy was in front of me, walking in the same direction as I was. He had a dark blue jacket on and was moving at a slow, steady pace. The other person was coming toward us from the opposite side, walking down the road. That one was easy to spot in the fading light. He was wearing this light gray hoodie. Not pure white, but still bright enough to stand out. I slowed my pace, looked around. It was just us 3 on this long, quiet stretch of road. No cars passing, no bikes. Just that faint rustling from the bushes and the sound of my steps on the dirt. I figured, all right, it's fine, and decided to light my cigarette. So I glanced down, cupping my hand around the lighter because of the little evening breeze. The flame flickers, catches, and I take a quick drag. This all takes, 2 seconds? 3? When I look up, the guy in the gray hoodie is gone. Just gone. He hadn't passed me yet. He hadn't brushed by. I didn't hear footsteps running or leaves moving or anything. 1 second he's there, clear as day, walking toward us. The next second, nothing. Empty road. The guy in front of me, the one in the dark jacket, had just been about to pass him. I saw his reaction. His body kind of jerked, like he'd just hit an invisible wall. He turned his head sharply to where the man should have been, like his brain was trying to catch up with what his eyes had just seen. And I could tell, he had definitely seen him. And he had definitely seen him disappear. There wasn't even a pause after that. He just ran. I mean, full-on sprint. He bolted downhill toward the main road like something had exploded behind him. No looking back, no trying to be subtle. You could see pure fear in the way he moved, like his legs were deciding faster than his mind could. Meanwhile, I'm standing there with a cigarette in my hand, my heart suddenly pounding. My first thought was, do I really want to keep walking in that direction? But you know how it is. I tried to act like I wasn't scared. I told myself, maybe I missed something. Maybe he stepped off the road. Maybe there's a side path I never noticed. I didn't want this to turn into some horror movie in my head, so I kept walking. When I reached the spot where the man in the gray hoodie should have been, I slowed down and actually stopped. checked the bushes on both sides of the road. I looked behind a little concrete barrier on the edge. I even peered into this small ditch where people sometimes throw trash. Nothing, just a strange, heavy kind of silence. I stood there longer than I probably should have, just listening. My cigarette had burned almost halfway down between my fingers, and I hadn't even taken another drag. I remember thinking, if this was a prank, it's a really committed one. There was nowhere for him to go that quickly. The road stretches out in a fairly straight line there. If he'd run, I would have seen him. If he ducked into a yard, I would have at least heard something. But there was nothing. Just that empty road and my racing heartbeat. I really wish I could talk to the guy who ran. I still think about him sometimes. Like, did he see exactly what I saw? Did he see more? Did he see something in that split second that I didn't catch because I was looking down at my lighter? But I never saw him again. I don't even know his name. Just some stranger who was there for the weirdest moment of my life and then disappeared from it. Same as the man in the gray hoodie. That night, when I got back to my cousin's place, I was quiet. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I just showered, ate, and pretended everything was normal. But inside, I was still back on that road. For a while after that, I avoided that route. I'd take the busier road home, even if it meant no sneaky cigarettes. Every time I thought about going back, I'd picture that empty stretch of road and the way that guy took off running like he'd seen the edge of the world. Eventually, though, I did go back. Life kind of forced me to. Habits, shortcuts, routines, and nothing else happened. No strange figures, no disappearances. Just the same quiet road, the same fading light, the same long walk home. But that memory, it never really softened. It just stayed sharp. And look, I've asked myself all the usual questions. Was it the light playing tricks on my eyes? Did he just step behind something at the perfect moment? Did my brain just fill in the gaps wrong? Thing is, it wasn't just me. That other guy saw him too. I saw the shock in his body language. I saw the fear in the way he ran. Whatever happened on that road, I'm convinced it wasn't just in my head. So yeah, that's the night I watched someone simply not be there anymore. I still don't know what I saw, but I know what I felt. What about you? If you were in my place, would you say it was a trick of the mind, or would you think something else was walking that road with us? Hey, little buddy. How's your day going? Whatever ups and downs you had today, let's put them aside for now and dive into the mysterious stories from all around the world that people have sent to Mr. M. Let's see what we've got tonight, okay? Don't forget to hit subscribe and tap the bell so you don't miss any new videos from Paranormal M. I love you guys. I live in an apartment block that went up sometime in the late 90s. It's nothing special, really. No famous stories, no rumors, nothing. We're still the first family to own this place. Well, technically my nan and granddad are. As far as I know, not even a goldfish has died in this flat. Even so, ever since I was a kid, I've always felt like there was something here. Just a little presence in the corner of the room, that kind of thing. But since I didn't grow up here full time, I ended up brushing it off as just a child's imagination. Until not too long ago, anyway. This happened about a year ago. I'd just come back from a late shift and went straight to the kitchen to throw something together for dinner. When I'm cooking, I usually put on a show or a podcast and wear headphones so I don't disturb anyone. That night, I was halfway through some story when I thought I heard a noise through the headphones. I paused the video and actually listened. Sure enough, there was knocking. Hard, heavy knocks coming from the front door. It was around 3 in the morning. Bit of an odd hour to be asking for sugar. And they were hitting the door like they were trying to punch a hole through it. I should probably mention that our area is not exactly the nicest. We've got all sorts of people living nearby, new arrivals, folks with addictions, drunks hanging around the shops. Because of that, we mostly mind our own business. We don't really know them, and they don't really know us. So the chances of someone randomly coming to us for help at that time? Pretty slim. Still, I tried to convince myself it might be one of the neighbors. We did help out a guy once when he got locked out without his keys, but he'd passed away months before this happened. I walked a bit closer to the front door. If it was really someone who needed help, they'd be ringing the doorbell too, yeah? Most people would. But the bell never rang. The closer I got, the more frantic the knocking sounded, like whoever, or whatever it was getting impatient. And then, out of nowhere, I got this absolutely overwhelming feeling that it was my Nan standing on the other side. I could picture her perfectly, hair all mussed, in her pale nightgown, blinking at the light in the hallway and waiting for me to open up. But I knew she was asleep in her room. She'd come home around 10:30 and gone straight to bed. I'd heard her. I stopped where I was. I didn't go any nearer. I didn't look through the peephole. I had this horrible certainty that if I looked, I'd see my Nan. But it wouldn't really be her, if that makes sense. I turned around and went back to the kitchen, trying to talk myself down. I put my headphones back on, hit play, and pretended like nothing was happening. After a while, I realized I couldn't hear anything under the audio anymore. I paused it and slid the headphones off. Nothing. Just silence. No knocking, no shuffling, no one in the hall. I finished up in the kitchen and went to my room. That night, I avoided the front door completely. I didn't even want to walk past the bathroom, and it's right next to it. The knocking came back later on. Not that exact night, but over the next few weeks. It happened a few more times, always late, always the same heavy pounding. And every time I stopped being scared, like, really told myself I wasn't afraid, it went quiet straight away. The last time it happened, it only lasted a few seconds because I just sort of snapped and thought, I'm not scared of you. Nan reckoned it was probably that woman. The spirit of her anyway. She told me that if I ever heard the knocking again, I should call out to her and tell her she didn't need to stay here anymore. But I never heard it again. A few years ago, I went to see a medium who claimed he could talk to people who had passed on. During our session, he told me my grandfather was there with us. He even said his full name, clear as day. The medium said my grandfather wanted me to go play bingo, something Grandpa had done all the time when he was alive, and that he would make it worth my while. I hadn't set foot in a bingo hall in forever, but the medium insisted my grandfather would send me a sign when it was time to go. One evening, I was in the kitchen washing dishes when I heard a local ad come on. This time from my phone, not the radio. A sponsored post popped up on Facebook about a big bingo night happening in my hometown, about an hour's drive away. As soon as I heard it, something inside me just clicked. I called out to my husband, "Let's drive down to my parents' place. You can hang out with the boys while I go play bingo." And off we went. That night at bingo, I ended up winning $260. When I got back to my parents' house, I burst through the door and announced my win. Everyone got excited and crowded around, wanting to see the money. Then it happened. A sudden, bone-deep chill ran straight through me, like someone had opened a walk-in freezer around just my body. I asked, "Did anyone else feel that?" It just got freezing in here. Nobody even looked up. No reaction at all. I raised my voice. "You guys, did you not feel how cold it just got?" Still nothing. It was like I wasn't even in the room. The cold wrapped tighter around me, and for a few seconds I honestly felt invisible. Then, just as quickly as it started, it stopped. The room felt normal again. Everyone went back to chatting with me, like nothing weird had happened. I asked, "Did you hear me asking you about the cold?" And they all said the same thing. "No." You didn't say anything. I was like, "What the?" I reached into my pocket to pull out the folded bills to prove my bingo win. I counted them out on the table. Right in the middle of the stack of 20s was a tiny wooden bridge from a fiddle. I froze. The bingo lady had counted the money out loud as she handed it to me, and I had double-checked it before shoving it into my pocket. There was definitely no little piece of wood, no fiddle bridge, nothing but cash. Here's where it gets really eerie. My grandfather was a well-known fiddle player in our town. Everyone knew him for that. My dad keeps Grandpa's 2 fiddles locked away in a cabinet, always telling us, and later my boys, never to touch them. I held up the bridge and showed everyone. My dad's face went completely pale. He walked straight to the cabinet, took out the fiddles, and checked them. One of them was missing its bridge. I still have no logical explanation for how that fiddle bridge ended up folded into my bingo winnings. All I know is this. During those strange, silent seconds when that freezing breeze wrapped around me, and nobody could hear my voice, my grandfather found a way to let me know. This was him. For the sake of the holiday spirit of this month, I figured I'd dust off one of the weirder heirlooms my family seems to pass down. Brushes with the occult. Paranormal activity runs in my bloodline the way eye color does in other people's families. Even though I have to admit, my own experiences are pretty mild compared to some of the nightmare fuel I've found rummaging through the deepest catacombs of Reddit. Believe me or don't, that's honestly fine. The ones who do, and the ones who've been through similar stuff, will know exactly what I'm talking about. I'll start with my grandfather. Back in his youth, when he was working as a driver and courier along the Pacific coast of Mexico, he would take this long, lonely highway that stitched together his tiny town in the hills to a distant port city. We're talking hours of driving through nothing but scrubland and broken fences. At night, the road was almost pitch black, barely any lampposts, just the headlights and whatever the moon felt like giving. He claimed that out there, he'd see all sorts of things no one had any business seeing. Not the headless man or La Llorona like in the classic stories, but a woman in white, walking backwards along the side of the road, her hair covering her face, and a black dog that kept pace with his truck no matter how fast he was going. Sometimes, in the dead of night at home, he'd hear the old wooden wardrobe in the hallway creak open and shut followed by the sound of bare feet running across the tiles. When he rushed out, nothing. Wardrobe closed, floor dry, everyone snoring. Other nights it was the radio, switching on by itself to static, the volume slowly rising like someone was leaning closer and closer to the dial. He'd walk into the room, and the thing would just cut off. Silence. He never got proof of any of it, and he's in Sheol now, so his stories are all I have to go on. My dad, though, he got the worst of it. His story begins in the sprawling, half-finished neighborhoods that grew like weeds around Mexico's biggest city. Back then, TV was about as common as an honest politician in government nowadays, so kids made their own entertainment. In his block, they went straight for the occult. They'd draw chalk circles on the floor, chant names they'd heard from older cousins, and play their own off-brand versions of Ouija with a glass cup and a piece of cardboard. They swore that once they managed to lift a whole kid off the ground using only their index fingers, all of them huddled around like it was a birthday party from hell. So one night, during one of these improvised rituals, my father, being young, cocky, and allergic to keeping his mouth shut, started talking trash. Not just about ghosts, but about the devil himself, herself, theyself. It wasn't even that creative, more arrogant than offensive. But apparently, that was enough to put a nice, bright target on his back. That same night, he says, something came to collect on his stupidity. He was lying in bed, half asleep, when he suddenly realized he couldn't move. He couldn't call out, couldn't twitch, nothing. But his eyes were wide open. Outside, the wind picked up, and the metal sheets on the roof began to roar. One of the windows kept rattling, like somebody was trying to force it open from the outside. The house, one of those self-built places my grandfather raised with his own hands, didn't have proper doors yet. Instead of a bedroom door, my dad had strings of beads and an old blanket tacked above the frame for privacy. He says he felt this crawling urge to look toward the doorway. He didn't move his head. He couldn't. But his eyes slid over. He was still pinned there, every muscle locked. Then he felt the mattress dip beside him, the way it does when someone heavy sits down. The bed springs groaned. Out of the corner of his vision, in the dark by his feet, something began to gather. A patch of darkness, darker than the room itself. A tall, narrow shape formed. It didn't have a clear face, just edges, a silhouette. But it definitely had a hat. And where its eyes should have been, my dad swears he saw 2 burning points of red. Not bright, more like embers in a dying fire. The figure didn't move closer. It just sat there, half turned toward him, staring straight into his eyes. Seconds turned into what felt like hours. The roof howled, the window rattled, and still that shape didn't blink, didn't breathe, just watched. Then, as calmly as it had arrived, it stood up. The mattress rose back to its original position. The beads parted again, and the figure glided out. Same slow pace, like a priest leaving a sanctuary or some kind of grim procession. The blanket fell. The wind quieted. And suddenly, my father could move again. You'd think that would be a one-time punishment. It wasn't. This kept happening, sometimes a few times a week, for years. And it wasn't always identical. Sometimes the figure stood in the doorway instead of sitting. Sometimes it was just a hat and shoulders in the corner of the ceiling. It followed him from house to house, neighborhood to neighborhood, as he grew up, got married, and with a baby on the way. New walls, same visitor. Hatman didn't retire with my father either. I've caught a glimpse of something like him, but not the paralyzing, cinematic horror my dad went through. For me, it was quick and almost stupidly ordinary. I was going about my day, shuffling between my room and the kitchen, when I walked past a hallway mirror and saw, over my own reflection, a second outline. Taller than me. Hat. Shoulders. No features. By the time I turned around expecting to see some prank, the hallway was empty. No one behind me. Just me and the stale smell of old air. I've always wondered if any of this is supposed to mean something. What's the point of psychologically tormenting a teenager who doesn't even have his life together yet? Is there a message? A warning? Or is it just cruelty for its own sake? One thing I've come to suspect from my own experiences is that the original gaslighters, the master architects of smoke and mirrors, have been hanging around humanity since we first started telling stories around fires. We sanitize them now, call them negative energy, entities, malignant forces, spirits. But there was likely a time when people carved their faces into stone and called them gods. I don't think of myself as someone who believes in ghosts. I always feel like I have to get that out of the way first, because what I'm about to tell you makes me sound like I should be burning sage and sleeping with a Bible under my pillow. Even now, though, years later, I can't quite shake the feeling that something was very wrong with the apartment we rented in a tiny town in southern Ohio. We moved there from upstate New York when I was a kid. Me, my older sister, my mom, and her boyfriend. The building sat on a corner lot, across from the railroad tracks. A tired, 3-story brick place with a faded sign for a barber shop that had closed long before we got there. We had the middle floor. Some guy my mom only ever referred to as the man upstairs lived above us. The shop on the ground floor was empty. The layout should have been our first hint that the place was strange. When you came in from the outside stairs, you didn't enter a normal hallway. You stepped into this long, narrow corridor, with doors on one side like compartments on a train, and bare plaster on the other. My sister's and my bedroom was at the very end. The living room came before that. To get to the kitchen, you had to walk through my mom's room, like it was just another section of hallway. Every door had these old glass knobs and transom windows over the top that could tilt open, like the house was built before anyone cared about privacy. The doors were the first thing that started acting up, or at least, that's when we began to notice. They didn't swing open like in a horror movie. The knobs would turn. You'd be sitting on the couch, nobody near the hallway, and you'd hear that tiny clink of glass. See the knob give a slow twist, and then the door would ease itself open a few inches. If you closed it firmly, it would do it again later. We told ourselves it was the building settling, or the train vibrations shaking things loose. The whole place trembled whenever a freight train rolled by, so it sounded reasonable enough. Then the transom windows started opening too. You'd shut them for the night, and in the morning, a couple would be tipped forward, letting in cold air. My mom swore she hadn't touched them. We started joking that the apartment was breathing. It didn't stay funny for very long. Almost every night, around the same time, we'd hear what we thought were footsteps, but not from the hallway. that came from above the ceiling, like somebody was walking slowly, heel to toe, across the length of the apartment. The man upstairs worked nights, so half the time his car wasn't even in the driveway when we heard it. I told myself it was pipes, or raccoons, or the sound of trains echoing in the bones of the building. Old places make noise. I've lived in enough of them to know. What I still don't have a good explanation for are the pennies. It started with one or two. You'd be brushing your teeth, look down, and there'd be a penny lying in the middle of the bathroom floor that you were sure wasn't there a minute ago. Or you'd sit down at the kitchen table and feel something under your bare foot. Another penny, face up, right under your heel. At first we thought my mom's boyfriend was messing with us. He liked practical jokes, and leaving change around where we'd notice would have been his kind of thing. He swore it wasn't him. We didn't believe him until it started happening to him too. The pattern got weirder. The pennies always showed up in straight lines. 4 or 5 of them in a row stretching across the counter. 3 in a perfect little path from the doorway to the couch. Once, my sister woke up with a neat line of them on the floor between her bed and the door, like a trail or a boundary. None of us kept that much change in our pockets, and when we checked the dates on them, most were old. 60s, 50s, even a couple from the 40s. That was when my mom decided she wanted to know more about the building. One Saturday, she marched us all down to the town hall, where the clerk dug out dusty property records and let her flip through them at a side table. No microfiche this time, just crumbly files and carbon copies. We found out the building used to be a boarding house for railroad workers. Before that, the lot had held a small wooden place that got damaged in a flood and torn down. There were no notes about deaths, no sensational stories buried in the paperwork. Nothing that explained why our apartment seemed to be spitting out spare change from the past. My mom came home with photocopies anyway. Like maybe if she stared at them long enough, they'd reveal some secret we'd missed. Years later, when I got curious, I tried plugging the address into Google Maps. The image that came up made my stomach drop. The brick building was still there, but it had been turned into apartments with vinyl siding slapped over the old storefront, and bright new windows where our wobbly ones used to be. Different paint, different railings, same bones. If you didn't know what you were looking at, it would seem like any other cheap rental in a small town. We lasted almost 2 years in that place. We might have stayed longer if not for the storm. It was late summer, the kind of Ohio thunderstorm that makes the whole sky go white. The power had already gone out once and flickered back to life. The 3 of us kids, me, my sister, and the neighbor girl from upstairs, had crashed early on a pile of blankets in our room after playing cards by flashlight. My mom and her boyfriend were still awake in their room, talking. What they told me later is this. First came the footsteps overhead, slow and steady, crossing from one end of the apartment to the other. Nothing new. Then they heard the hallway door click as the knob turned. They watched it swing open. The draft brushed past them, cool and damp, smelling faintly like pennies and old metal. A second later, from the living room, they heard the distinct clatter of our board game box being opened. Not the thunder, not the trains. A cardboard lid sliding, pieces rattling. The little plastic houses and metal tokens tapping against each other like someone's hand was buried in them. My mom's boyfriend thought it was us, of course. He stomped down the hallway, ready to yell at us for sneaking out of bed during a lightning storm. He reached our doorway and shined the flashlight in. We were all out cold, mouths open, limbs everywhere. That deep, boneless sleep kids have after a long day. The board game was exactly where we'd left it, stacked on a shelf in the living room closet, lid closed. He told me he felt something then, a sort of buzzing in his teeth like the air was humming. And for the first and only time in his life, he admitted he wanted to bolt out of the building and stand in the pouring rain just to get away from it. Instead, he dragged the game into our room and set it on the floor next to us, like maybe having it where he could see it would help. It didn't. He spent the rest of the night sitting upright on the edge of the mattress, flashlight in one hand and a baseball bat in the other, staring at the dark hallway and listening for footsteps that never quite came close enough. We moved out within a week. The official reason was that my mom found a cheaper place closer to her job, which was technically true. The real reason was that none of us wanted to keep waking up to pennies in tidy lines across the floor, or doors that opened themselves, or the sound of someone poking through our things when we weren't the ones doing it. Ever since I was a kid, I felt deeply connected to people, animals, and even random little things. I've always been super sensitive. I care a lot, but I also get attached in this strange way. If I ever felt any kind of emotional pull towards something, I just couldn't get rid of it. I still have boxes of tiny trinkets I've collected over the years, and I arrange them carefully around my room, like they all have their own little stories and don't want to be forgotten. When I was younger, I didn't just have imaginary friends. I had one presence that felt almost as real as any person. I could see it in my mind so clearly and talk to it like it was actually there. Throughout my life, I've had weird, unexplainable things happen. I'm only 23, but I've already seen things that don't make sense. I've seen figures that looked faded, like they belonged to another time, or people who I knew weren't alive anymore. For some reason, I was never really afraid of them. And just to be clear, I've never been diagnosed with psychosis, hallucinations, or any mental illness that could explain all this. About 2 years ago, I really dove into the whole spiritual and paranormal side of things. I started meditating and trying to reach out to spirit guides. Sometimes I'll free write or doodle when I feel a certain energy around me, just letting my hand move and seeing what shows up. I don't even know if any of it is real, but ever since I started doing that, everything has felt heavier, darker. I don't feel like the same person anymore. When I'm alone, especially late at night or going up the stairs, it's not just the usual someone might be watching me feeling. It's like something is right behind me, matching my steps. I tried that visualization technique where you imagine a bright shield or bubble of light surrounding you. At first, it actually made me feel safer, but lately, it feels like something is pressing against it, like it's starting to crack. I've felt invisible hands on me when no one was there. I've found scratches on my back and arms that I can't explain. I've woken up with bruises in odd places. I even went to the doctor, and they told me it might be from moving or hitting something in my sleep. But that just doesn't sit right with me. Recently, I've been waking up drenched in sweat, heart racing, like I've been running from something in my dreams. One night I woke up, and there were several figures standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me. They didn't look like regular people. They looked faded and damaged, like they'd been pulled out of a ruined painting. Their skin was grayish and wrong. One looked like an older man in an old-fashioned military coat. Another was a young girl in a torn white dress, clutching a stuffed animal. I was completely awake. I remember every detail. It terrified me, and it scared my boyfriend too, who was lying right next to me when I gasped and grabbed him. But what really shook me was something my boyfriend told me not long ago. He said that about a year ago, he woke up in the middle of the night and felt someone lying beside him, but it wasn't me. He said he saw a woman with long red hair, mine is short and blonde, lying there, facing him, her eyes wide open and glassy, just staring at him without blinking. He said her skin looked waxy, like a body that shouldn't be moving. He panicked, reached for the lamp, and when he turned the light on, it was just me, fast asleep, facing the other way. He didn't tell me about it until recently, because the memory still freaks him out. Hearing that messed me up, because it lines up way too well with everything else that's been happening. So now I'm stuck in this place of not knowing. Is there actually something attached to me? Am I bringing this on somehow? Or is all of this just one impossible string of coincidences that I'm connecting in my head because I'm scared? I lost my mother this spring to a long illness. Since then, I've been noticing these weird, quiet little moments that feel like communication. My first instinct has always been to explain everything away. I'm a skeptic, agnostic, and up until very recently, I didn't really believe in an afterlife or any lingering consciousness. I still don't know what I believe. I'll list a few things. They're probably easy to debunk, but because I'm not in the best state of mind, I've been struggling to think clearly. The chime that rings on its own. When I was younger, our old apartment had this cheap motion sensor chime by the front hallway. It would beep whenever someone walked past. After my grandfather died more than a decade ago, it randomly went off for a few summers, always around the time of his death and his birthday. No one near it, no doors opening, just beep. We joked that it was him visiting. Now I live in a small place in a different city on the West Coast. There's no motion chime anymore, just the little ding-dong from the smart door sensor when it detects the door opening. The days after my mom passed, it kept making the sound, even when the door was completely shut. It only happened in the late morning to early afternoon, for 3 days straight. Then it stopped. Since then, nothing. Same heat wave, same strong sunlight hitting the door. Temperature shot well past 100 degrees Fahrenheit for weeks. If it was a wiring thing or the sun hitting the sensor just right, why only those specific days? Why only in broad daylight right after she died? The calendar flipping itself. We have this old school wall calendar in the dining area. Big pages, glossy paper, held by a little metal clip. During the time my grandmother and her siblings stayed over, the ceiling fan in there was on high basically 24/7. Same speed, same angle, every single day. One afternoon, I almost never leave my room, but that day I wandered out to grab water. I walked past the table and the calendar suddenly snapped loose and flipped down onto the floor right in front of me. It opened to the month of my mom's birthday, even though we were in a different month entirely. The fan had been blowing like that for weeks. Why did it decide to fall right then, in that specific moment, onto that specific page, while I just happened to be standing there? Convenient sample of my grief brain? Probably. But it still felt personal. Her voice at the burial. The funeral was about a month after she passed. I hadn't heard her healthy voice in so long. Those last months, everything she said was raspy and fragmented. She would run out of breath mid-sentence. By the time the funeral came around, I honestly couldn't remember what her normal voice sounded like. I avoided videos because they hurt too much. At the burial, while they were lowering the casket, I suddenly heard her. Same clarity and volume as my own internal monologue. She said, very gently, "Hey, Anak. I have to go now. I love you." It was so sudden that it made me catch my breath. I was exhausted, stressed, barely sleeping. So yeah, could have been my brain reaching for comfort, some kind of brief waking hallucination. Every now and then I'll hear her again, not out loud in the room, more like a thought that doesn't feel like mine. Soft, distant, but direct. Usually short phrases that feel like answers to questions I'm already thinking. I know it could just be me asking, what would she say, and filling in the blank from memory. But it feels different than when I imagine other people talking. She popped my cyst. She promised she'd take care of it again when I feel better. She never got the chance. Then, on her birthday this year, that cyst suddenly started to hurt. Out of nowhere. It went from, I forget this exists, to like a 610 burning, throbbing pain that lasted almost 2 weeks. It turned a bit red and hot. I couldn't sleep on my back, couldn't focus at work. I finally went to urgent care, and they told me I'd probably need a minor procedure to get it excised. I was sitting there, under those bright hospital lights, overwhelmed. And for some reason I just didn't go through with scheduling it. I went home. About a week later, the pain just stopped. Not gradually. More like one day it hurt, the next day it didn't. The bump, which had been raised for years, was suddenly flat. It never burst, never leaked. One day there's this dome under my skin. Next day it's basically gone. Now there's only a faint little mark left, and it keeps getting flatter and more normal looking. Yes, I know bodies are weird and things get reabsorbed and all that. I know it could be a coincidence that this whole process started on her birthday. But still, she always said, "I'll get rid of that thing for you." And then, it vanished. She helped my great-grandmother go. My great-grandmother passed away at 92 not long ago. She lived in another country, so I only heard everything secondhand through relatives' calls and messages. Apparently, in the last few days, she refused food and water and spent hours talking to people no one else could see. She kept saying my mom's name. She'd smile at an empty corner of the room and nod like she was listening, then tell everyone, "It's okay, they're waiting for me." After 3 days like that, she slipped away peacefully in her sleep. By then it had been a few months since my mom died. They were very close when my mom was younger. The rational part of me knows that people nearing the end often talk to loved ones who've passed. The brain does strange, merciful things. But another part of me imagines my mom taking her hand and walking her across whatever is next for them. So, I don't know what to think. Coincidences? Stress? Grief doing what grief does? Honestly, I feel a little crazy even typing all this out. And I feel extra crazy for letting myself wonder if there's more behind it. We have science to explain so many things. Random house noises, faulty wiring, memory glitches, internal voices. But some stubborn part of me keeps whispering, what if the dead use those exact systems? Electrical signals, chemicals in our brains, little physical accidents, to nudge us. What if they've become some sort of natural energy that can tweak particles just enough to get our attention? Maybe it really is just wild, coping imagination. Maybe it's both, grief and something we don't fully understand yet. What do you think? TT. Okay, so my best friend and I have both been seeing weird stuff lately, even though we live hours apart. Still same country though. It kinda started when I texted her about how I've been way more paranoid these days, and that I got sleep paralysis again. After that, my paranoia got so much worse. I started feeling like something was always low-key watching me, and that people were plotting weird shit, like IDK, setting me up, following me, or trying to lure me somewhere. I get freaked out by mirrors now, especially at night. If I see even a crack of my reflection in a dark mirror or TV screen, my heart just starts pounding. Even in the daytime, I'm mad wary about reflective stuff now, like glass doors and mirrors and all that. One time, I fell asleep on the floor in the living room, and I had this dream where I was lying there, and suddenly the hallway got super bright for a second, like someone turned on a light. In the doorway, I saw a tall figure just standing there, facing me. I tried to shout for my mom and started swearing at it, and then I woke up. The hallway light was actually off, and the door was closed, so I knew it was just a dream. But then I swear I heard our front door handle move, like someone turning it really slowly. After that, I kept getting up over and over to check if the door was locked. A few weeks later, I had another episode of sleep paralysis in my room. I didn't see anything this time. I usually get auditory stuff, like weird noises or whispers. But my best friend sees actual figures and faces. This one wasn't even that bad, TBH, so I don't need to describe it. But what pissed me off was that every time I tried to fall asleep again, it felt like it was trying to drag me right back into paralysis. Like 10 times in a row. I was more annoyed and angry than scared at that point. Meanwhile, my best friend keeps saying she sees people just standing in corners or peeking around door frames at her. Me and her are always weirdly in sync with the stuff that happens to us, so it freaks us out even more. And keep in mind, right now, both of us are struggling way more in school, and we low-key think this crap is part of the reason. I barely sleep properly anymore and keep staying up late, which just makes the paranoia worse. She told me recently she saw a woman peeking at her from the end of her bed, and last night I actually saw a bright flicker in the reflection of my bedroom window. I was fully awake this time, not dreaming. I bolted into my room and locked everything because I was terrified. I wasn't sure if I was hallucinating, so I didn't tell my mom anything. That same night, I felt something lightly brush against my ankle under the blanket. and when I looked up, I saw this tall, dark shape by my closet, like pressed against the wall. It vanished the second I really tried to focus on it. I honestly don't know if I'm just so paranoid that my brain is making this stuff up, or if something is actually happening. Please help, because it's been messing with my already screwed up head. And my focus in school is getting worse too. People at school have literally noticed I'm not in the right headspace. So, where to start? This is a personal story of mine, one I still don't really know how to explain. A few years back, some friends and I spent a weekend in a little river town called Riverton. I've got family there, and had lived in town for a while before moving closer to the city. We were around 18 to 19 at the time, and there were 5 of us total. It was a cool, late spring evening, nothing going on, so we decided to wander around this place called Cottonwood Flats, a little island park on the river. Just a bunch of bored kids who don't drink or smoke and had nothing better to do. We headed out around dusk, thinking we could do the whole loop before it got fully dark. Yeah, that didn't happen. We started on the far side of the island where the trail hugs the river, with those big, half-buried rocks along the edge. Pretty sure it was meant for bikes more than people. It had rained the night before, so everything was damp, the trail kind of slick. One of my good friends suggested we cut off into the trees instead of staying on the main path. Personally, I don't do woods at night, after rain, when it's cold and muddy. Of course, I was the only one against it, and majority rules, so into the trees we went. As we got deeper into the woods, one of our friend's parents, I'll call him Mason, started blowing up his phone. Mason was from Riverton originally, and so was his mom. She kept calling and texting, asking him what he was doing out there that late, telling him to watch out for drifters and to not stay out on the island too long because bad things happen out there. Her words, not mine. We all kind of laughed it off and kept going, farther and farther in, until we hit the end of the worn trail. Somewhere along the way, the sounds of birds just faded. No bugs, no frogs, nothing. We came out into this wide clearing with tall, wet grass up past our shins. It would have been pretty in daylight, but by then it was basically pitch black. We started goofing around, trying to shove each other into the grass, tripping over clumps of dirt and roots, just being idiots. That's when we heard it. It was this high, sharp, whistle-like sound off in the grass. Not like a normal whistle, though. It had this weird depth to it, like a bird screeching from way inside a metal pipe or something. It sounded organic, but it made your skull buzz a little, set your teeth on edge. My childhood buddy, I'll call him James, who's been hunting since he was a kid, just laughed, shrugged it off, and stepped straight into the tall grass, saying it was probably some injured bird or rabbit. When he got a little ways in, we realized water had pooled under the grass. He was walking in ankle-deep, cold, muddy water. Our one native friend, not super important, just context, quietly started praying in Lakota under her breath. Then she just stopped walking, completely froze. She spun around and asked us, really panicked, if any of us had whistled. James shouted from somewhere in the grass that he had, just joking around, and she immediately tried to get us to leave. James ignored her and kept wading further away, the grass swallowing him up. Then we heard it again. The same whistle, only closer. And it seemed to come from right where James had gone, but not in his voice. A second later, James burst out of the grass, splashing water everywhere, breathing hard. He asked if anyone had followed him in, if I had tried to mess with him, grab him, anything like that. I told him no, none of us had moved from the edge. We all did this quick, nervous scan around us, but there was nothing there. Just black shapes of trees, wet grass, and that strange, heavy quiet. No one argued after that. We just left. We didn't tell anyone about it for a long time because it sounded ridiculous, even to us. I had never seen James that shaken before. He was always the brave one of the group, the guy who would go first into anything spooky just to prove it wasn't a big deal. Later on, when he finally opened up about it, he said he felt someone right behind him in the grass, matching his steps, and then a hand closing over his shoulder like it was about to spin him around. When I asked our native friend again, later, why she freaked out when she heard the whistle, she shut down immediately. She wouldn't talk about it at all, just changed the subject. Even the question seemed to scare her. A little while after that trip, Mason told us quietly that people in town avoided Cottonwood Flats after dark. He said it had a reputation. The fall before we went out there, a man, a father, had gone to the island and ended his own life near one of the clearings. Ever since then, according to some of the locals, that part of the island was just wrong, a place where misfortune hangs around longer than it should. This all started back in 2020. My fiance at the time was working several states away. I was home by myself with our 3 kids. For about a week straight, every clear night I'd catch these strange lights moving across the sky. Not like planes, not like stars, just odd. Drifting, stopping, then darting off. One long, hot Friday, I finally crawled into bed. I was exhausted, but my body refused to shut down. I kept tossing and turning, flipping my pillow, staring into the dark. After what felt like forever, maybe 2 hours, I finally slipped into that heavy, almost dreamless kind of sleep. Then, something yanked me out of it. I woke up suddenly, heart pounding, with the absolute certainty that I wasn't alone in the room. I was turned toward the wall, facing my kids sleeping beside me. All 3 of them in my line of sight. My brain went into overdrive. Had someone broken in? There had been a few break-ins a few streets over, and that was the first thing that came to mind. I slowly rolled onto my back and stayed as still as I could, just listening. The house was silent. No footsteps, no doors, no creaking floorboards. But that feeling, that presence, wouldn't go away. Then I saw it. A shape. A figure. Hard to tell what it was at first. Like my eyes weren't cooperating, I judged the distance, thinking I could probably make it to where we kept the gun before it reached me or the kids. I tried to sit up. Nothing. My body wouldn't move. I felt like I'd turned to concrete. A wave of panic washed over me. My chest tightened. Breath speeding up. That's when I heard a voice. The calmest, gentlest voice I've ever heard in my life. We're not going to hurt anyone, even now, years later. Remembering those words gives me chills. The fear just drained out of me. Not all at once, but enough that I wasn't terrified anymore. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I realized there wasn't just one figure. Another, taller one stood nearby, and two smaller ones hovered just behind them. At the time I thought, maybe they're kids? They murmured to each other in low voices, but I couldn't understand a single word. The one closest to me stepped forward, and that's when I really saw the light. A soft, blue glow, like it was coming from under the skin. It traced along its limbs, like every vein in its body was lit up. It was beautiful and eerie at the same time. As it moved closer, the others began to glow too. The same dim blue radiance. I still couldn't make out clear facial features, but I knew immediately they were not human. I remember silently begging myself to wake up, thinking, this has to be some wild dream. But deep down, I knew I wasn't dreaming. I was awake, completely awake. The thing that stayed with me then, and still does now, is how beautiful they were, and how peaceful I felt near them. It sounds insane, but that's the truth. I don't know what happened next exactly. Either I blacked out, or they did something to me, because the next thing I remember, I was no longer in my bedroom. I was on my back, staring up at a smooth, metallic ceiling that reflected a faint light. Whatever I was lying on was freezing cold, the kind of cold that feels sharp. I tried to move, but the only thing I could control were my eyes. I've never felt cold like that night, like it was inside my bones. I felt exposed, but not like I was naked. It was a different kind of exposed, like they could see straight through me, like every memory, every thought, every fear was wide open to them. I got a clearer look this time. It was very tall, maybe just under 7 feet. The head was shaped like what people describe as a gray alien, large, smooth, with huge dark eyes that seemed to swallow the light. Hardly any nose, and just a thin slit where the mouth should be. There was a low, constant hum all around me, like machinery far away, or electricity buzzing in the walls. It seemed to get stronger whenever they moved. Another one came into view, what I instinctively thought of as female. I don't know why, I just did. She walked up beside the tall one. He spoke first, but I couldn't hear the words, like his voice was just out of reach. Then she spoke, clear as day, in the back of her mind, hidden away. She knows she's safe. She reached down and ran her fingers gently through my hair. My long auburn hair fanned out beneath me. The tall one said she was alone, except for the children. As soon as he said it, an image flashed in my mind. It was like a memory and a vision at the same time. I saw my kids, fast asleep in my bed, with 3 of the other beings standing around them, almost like they were standing guard. The female said, "They'll be together soon, and we'll check in." I can't fully explain it, but I suddenly felt this weird familiarity with the place, like it wasn't my first time there. The thought formed in my head, have I been here before? And before I could even finish it, she cut in again, almost amused. "Oh, there it is. But after this, she will fall into a deep sleep. She won't remember, or it will only feel like a dream." I felt a sharp rush of cold in my left arm, similar to getting an IV, but without the sting. Just pressure and freezing cold spreading through my veins. The next thing I remember, I was upright in my own bed, gasping like I'd broken the surface of deep water. I immediately checked on my kids. All three were there, curled up and breathing softly, totally fine. I slid out of bed, legs shaky, and headed toward the bathroom to try to make sense of what had just happened. I felt heavy and off balance, like gravity was pulling too hard. I had to hold on to the dresser, then the door frame, just to keep from stumbling. In the bathroom, I didn't turn the light on. I just sat there in the dark. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a flicker of blue. My eyes darted down, and it was gone. Then I heard the faintest little giggle. I couldn't tell if it sounded like my children or like them. I got up slowly and made my way back to bed, still fighting that strange new weight feeling. I lay down, pulled the blanket up, shut my eyes, and felt something icy cool brush my cheek. Gentle, almost like a goodbye. When my fiancé finally came home from out of state, I told him everything. As we talked, we realized we'd both had a bizarre, overlapping dream around that same time. Similar images, similar blue light. We both feel like whatever that shared dream was, it ties into what I experienced that night. If you're familiar with energy lines and crossroads, the house this took place in sat right on a major one. Stuff drifted in and out constantly, and there was some kind of activity almost every night. It was a ridiculously good place to do paranormal investigations, because you almost always caught something you couldn't easily explain away. It was also the house I grew up in. For a little background on why this encounter is as detailed as it is, I'm a psychic medium, a trained medicine woman, and a professional paranormal investigator. I'm also putting a TW here because I will describe how this man died, and it may be upsetting for some people. One night years ago, in the little apartment on the property where I was living, I was sitting at my desk talking to a friend online. We were mid-conversation when we both noticed that my camera feed had this odd, hazy glow forming off to one side of my video image. We paused, and I turned my head to look. There was a man standing there. He didn't feel malicious, but he was absolutely injured. One of his arms ended just above the elbow, the rest of it simply gone. The skin on that side of his chest and neck was puckered and torn, like something had gone clean through him and then burned on the way out. The eye on that side of his face was clouded over and half closed. His hair was long and silver, braided back, and he was painfully thin. He wore a faded woven shirt with dark stripes, old-style trousers that hit just above his ankles, and he was barefoot. He was very clearly indigenous, but not a nation I recognized. I asked him his name. What he said was in a language I didn't understand. I asked him why he was there. He said very clearly, "Skyherd." "Is that your name?" I asked. He shook his head. "Skyherd," he repeated, and pointed past my wall toward the hills behind the house. "Is Skyherd with you?" He shook his head again. "No Skyherd. Skyherd. There." He pointed again. "Then what is the Skyherd?" He gave me this small, tired smile. After that, he began giving me his story in these broken, scattered pieces. A phrase here, an image there, a sensation, a word. I had to tape it all together to understand it. I'm not going to walk you through that whole process because it took almost 2 hours. Me scribbling notes on a pad, my friend on the video call helping me puzzle it out, asking clarifying questions, and the man confirming or denying with tiny nods or gestures. This is the story, laid out the way it was meant to be told. Our man, his son, and his nephew had been asked to go hunt. They were tracking an elk along a ridge, following its trail through the trees, when they lost the tracks in loose stone. The nephew suggested they spread out to pick up the trail again. The nephew went low, the son went to the right, and our man climbed higher along the slope. He eventually came out into a clearing that hadn't been there before. The last time he'd walked that route, it had been all dense forest. Now it was a wide, green, open meadow. That alone confused him. In this meadow, he saw animals he'd never seen before. Big as elk, but thicker, with heavy bodies and white coats that shimmered like mist. Their backs looked like they were made of clouds, but their hooves left marks on the ground. They grazed like normal animals, sniffed the air, watched him with wary eyes. But they looked wrong, like they were made of the sky and the morning fog at the same time. He had no word for them, so in his mind he called them the sky herd. They looked solid. They looked edible. And he knew nobody would believe him if he went back with nothing but a strange tail and no meat. Honestly, he barely believed what he was seeing himself. The herd bolted. The wounded animal staggered and fell, and he moved forward to claim it, calling out for his son and his nephew so they could help him dress the kill and carry it back. As he walked, he looked up and saw a bright white circle hanging low in front of him, like a second sun hovering at the edge of the meadow. Which made no sense, because he was between hills. He shouldn't have been able to see the real sun like that. Then there was a crack. Not a sound he knew, just a tearing of the world. Then there was pain. He couldn't hear. He couldn't see clearly. His chest felt like it had been ripped open from back to front. Breathing was like trying to pull air through rocks. He hit the ground and remembered the taste of dirt and metal in his mouth. The next memory he had was waking up in a dark, shaking wooden room that clattered and jolted beneath him. His son was next to him, also chained, trying to speak softly to calm him. People were all around them, his own people, others as well, pressed together on the floor. All he could really hear was coughing, crying, and the constant rattling of whatever they were inside of. He drifted in and out, his son's words blurred. He remembered being thirsty, the wound in his chest burning, the air full of smoke and dust. He died not long after that. Now, if you're wondering what exactly happened and what he really saw, here's what he was trying to tell me. He hadn't found some spiritual sky herd out of legend. He'd walked straight into a settler's fenced pasture of pale cattle, animals he'd never seen before in his life. He shot one with an arrow, thinking it was fair game, the same way his people had always hunted. The second sun he saw was the flash from a rifle he'd never seen, held by someone whose language he didn't speak, defending animals he didn't know could be owned. The bullet tore through his chest and out his back. He succumbed to his wounds while being moved, first by wagon, then on a train, along with his people who were being transported away from their land. He never really had the chance to explain what happened. or to have anyone believe that he'd seen something so strange and died for it. He told me the name of his nation, but I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in it here. It was a smaller tribe from the Central Plains, not one most people would recognize from history books. What mattered to him wasn't me getting every political detail perfect. What mattered was that, when I repeated the name back to him and said I'd remember it, he relaxed. After I promised to tell his story whenever I could, he smiled, did this little shuffle of a dance in place, and then he was gone. He crossed over. He couldn't move on until someone listened, believed him, and carried his story forward. He never got to in life. I share this story often to keep my promise to him. I don't tell it to be funny, or to mock him, or to shame him for what he did. I tell it because he waited roughly 2 centuries to give his account to someone who would sit there, listen, write it down and say, "I believe you." Now it's your turn to know it. I was driving back home in the middle of the night after hanging out with my friends. It was about 1:45 a.m. I live in the countryside in southern Europe, pretty isolated, and I was completely sober and very aware of everything around me. I was on this narrow country road when I noticed a faint, pale bluish light on the left side, a bit ahead of my car, maybe 80 to 100 meters in front of me, just hovering above a low stone wall that separates the road from a field. It looked like something peeking over the top of the wall to watch the road. My first thought was that it might be someone's phone flashlight, or maybe a bike light, or even some weird kind of reflector. I've lived here my whole life, and I drive that road almost every single night. I know where the street signs are, where the reflectors are, where animals usually cross. I know what animal eyes look like in my headlights. This was none of that. As I kept driving toward it, the light started to move. Not fast, not jerky, just this slow, eerily smooth glide. It slid sideways along the wall and then away from the road, like it was attached to something that was pulling itself back into the field. I could tell there was something there, like the light was fixed to a shape or a body, but my headlights weren't close enough to show what it was. It wasn't walking. It wasn't bounding like a deer or a dog. It wasn't a person either. It was like the light was fixed in one position, while whatever carried it was creeping or sliding underneath. Right before I reached that exact spot, the light moved behind a tall tree at the edge of the field and just disappeared. When I got there, I slowed almost to a stop and turned my head to look. Nothing. No person, no bike, no animal. No light source at all. Just the tree, the wall, and darkness. But I had seen it clearly for several long seconds. It wasn't a blink and you miss it thing. The second I realized it was gone, I got hit with this horrible gut feeling. My stomach dropped, and I honestly thought I was going to throw up right there in the car. It felt like I had just seen something I wasn't meant to see. Like I had walked in on something that should have stayed hidden. The feeling was disgusting, almost. Not just fear, more like a deep, instinctive revulsion. I've been having trouble sleeping since, even though this isn't my first weird experience with things I can't explain. But this time felt different, more real somehow. And I can't shake the image of that floating light gliding away from me into the dark. So growing up, I lived 3 houses down from this old abandoned church and its overgrown yard. Needless to say, I saw a few things as a kid that made me a believer. My dad always poked fun at me for it, right up until he had an experience of his own. That was, honestly, pretty validating. After that, he was at least more open to weird stuff. This particular thing happened years later. My dad goes up north every year to go fishing. Same remote lake, same crew of guys. I've been there with him a bunch of times, just not in the last few years. Anyway, one night after he got back from a trip, we were having a glass of whiskey. I mean, is there anything better to have a paranormal come to Jesus talk over? He said he wanted to tell me something that had happened on his last trip up there. The second night they were there, they were staying for 5 days. He was sitting on the tiny porch of their cabin, smoking. From there, he could look across the clearing into the boathouse, maybe 40 feet away. It's a small building with sliding doors where they keep motors, life jackets, fuel, all the stuff to keep the camp running. The camp is only reachable by boat or float plane. The doors were cracked open a bit, and he could see 2 glowing eyes. They were set in the outline of a very large dog, just standing there in the dark. At first, he figured he was just tired and a little buzzed, so he went back inside. The next morning, he went to check the boathouse, trying to figure out what could have given off eye shine like that. There was nothing. No reflectors, no paint, no glass. Nothing that would catch light like that at the right height. The next night, nothing. But the night after that, there it was again. This time he called one of the other guys out and pointed. "Hey, what do you see over there?" The guy squints and goes, "Jesus, that looks like a big fucking dog with glowing eyes." They ended up seeing it on multiple nights. My dad said he even saw its head shift a little, like it was turning to look at them. Which, to me, pretty much rules out it being just some stacked gear in a weird shadow. I got him to really describe it, and after showing him a bunch of big dog profiles, the one he picked out was closest to a Newfoundland. I'll be honest, I know the legends. You see a hellhound, and you've got a year to live, max. My dad has a heart condition, so I was more than a little freaked out. But it's been 2 years, and he's still here. At this point, I can only assume either it wasn't there for my dad, or it was guarding something, or someone, a lot more important than us. I was about 16 when this happened, and had always been a skeptic on the paranormal. But since then, I've been a 100% believer in it. Like no doubt in my mind anymore. Me and my family usually rent houses by the coast in northern Spain for vacations. And that's what we did too for that year's autumn break. I saw the place myself on the website. It looked really gorgeous. You know, old stone house on a hill with a view over the sea. The people going were me, my sister, my parents, and my aunt and uncle. When we arrived to the house, we realized that it must have been some sort of old monastery building or retreat before becoming an actual home. We were told it was built sometime in the late 1800s, and it was literally attached to a tiny abandoned chapel, like sharing a wall with it. As soon as we walk inside, I get this really heavy, strange feeling. The air felt different from the rest of the village, almost like it was thicker or something. But obviously I didn't say anything. Why would I? The house had 2 floors and a basement we were told was private and locked off. which was a bit weird, but whatever. There were 3 bedrooms upstairs, and I ended up getting my own room. And as much as I hate to admit it, I was terrified of sleeping alone in there. I asked my sister if she could sleep in the other bed, but obviously she said no, and told me to stop being dramatic. So my mom agreed to stay with me until I fell asleep, and then she would go back to her room once I was out. The actual experience happened on, I think, the 4th night. That night my mom had ended up falling asleep properly in the spare bed in my room instead of leaving, and I was in the bed I'd slept in the other days. My bed was pushed into this little alcove in the wall, and there was this old wooden folding screen that I'd pulled halfway around it so it felt more cozy and closed off. I fell asleep pretty fast, but I suddenly woke up in the middle of the night for no reason. I'm usually a very heavy sleeper and never wake at night. The second I woke up, I heard breathing. Not snoring, not my mom's breathing, but like quick, whispered breaths, right next to the folding screen on the other side, at the level of my head. Then it turned into the sound of very light footsteps, almost like someone tiptoeing on the old wooden floor. They started right by the side of my bed, walked along the screen behind my head, then out into the middle of the room and towards the door. I could hear the floorboards creak as if someone was really there. The steps left my room and went out into the hallway, and then just stopped. At this point, I was convinced it was my mom going to the bathroom or something, except I could still hear her breathing behind me in the other bed. That's when I properly freaked out. I slowly sat up and looked over. My mom was dead asleep, on her side, covers up to her chin. I could see her clearly. Still, I needed to prove to myself I wasn't crazy, so I got up and opened my door into the hallway. All the doors were closed. My aunt and uncle in the room at the end were completely out. My sister, too. No lights, no sounds. Nothing. There was nowhere for anyone to have gone. The staircase to the ground floor was right there, and I just stood at the top of it with my heart racing, feeling like someone had just run past me, but I was alone. The morning after, I asked everyone if anyone had gotten up at night, gone to the bathroom, anything. They all said no. My mom even joked that I was watching too many horror movies. I was on edge for the rest of the stay, but nothing like that happened again. Months later, out of nowhere, I brought it up again to my mom, and she just went quiet. Then she told me she'd been terrified of the house too, and had felt that same, heavy, weird energy since the first day. My sister had apparently told her she hated walking past the basement door because she felt like someone was standing right behind it. My mom also admitted that on the second night, when she'd stayed in my room until I fell asleep, she'd woken up to the sensation that someone was standing between our 2 beds, watching us. But she'd kept her eyes shut because she was too scared to look. To this day, I get goosebumps thinking about that hallway and those footsteps and that broken crystal. I honestly think something in that house didn't want us there. And judging by the way my pendant cracked, I don't think it was something friendly.